George Orwell, the renowned author of 1984 and Animal Farm, once said, "Journalism is printing what someone else does not want printed. Everything else is public relations." Ladies and gentlemen, Winnipeg Alternative Media presents Watchdog Weekly. No BS, no PR, all journalism. And now your host, Shawn Henry.
Excellent. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Media Watchdog Weekly. Welcome back, fellow watchdogs. I am your host, as always, Shawn Henry from the Mactown Smackdown. And joining me, as always, is my wonderful producer, also of the Mactown Smackdown, Mr. Alexander Ferguson. By the way, thank you for playing me in with that awesome updated intro, as always. How are things going over in Alberta this week? Or I guess technically this week you're in BC because you and the family are off on a little trip, correct?
I'm in BC. Yeah.
Right.
That is correct. Yes, BC. Right. I don't give a shit about how Alberta's doing. I'm in BC. We're doing good.
Fair enough. Well, that's good to hear. We're on a little bit of a delay here, so apologies if there's any confusion for anybody watching. Little less than ideal setup this week because, as we just established, Alex is away on a trip right now and is apparently sharing the Wi-Fi signal with about, from the sounds of it, I think he said like 5 or 6 other people. And there's only so much bandwidth to go around. So apologies tonight if there are any weird delays or technical glitches or anything like that. We are going to power through it.
It's all my fault.
It's definitely, yeah, exactly. If anything goes wrong, it's all Alex's fault. It's got nothing to do with me whatsoever. So again, welcome to the show tonight. Welcome, fellow watchdogs. We have an awesome show lined up for you tonight. It's another one of my prepared topics. We're on our alternating weeks. So we did our live stream Q&A 2 weeks ago. And tonight we are back with another prepared topic. Tonight's topic, as a little teaser, is tips on how to be a better / more effective communicator, essentially. But before we get into that, and before we even get into tonight's opening topic, which is going to be really fun, we have a great article to go over together. I have a few announcements and housekeeping and whatnot to get out of the way. So let me take one quick sip of water here. As always, Media Watchdog Weekly on Winnipeg Alternative Media is streaming live to Winnipeg Alternative Media's Facebook page, YouTube channel, and Twitter page. And we are also streaming live to the Mactown Smackdown Facebook page and Twitch account. So go and follow us and like us in all of those different platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Winnipeg Alternative Media, Mactown Smackdown. Go and follow all of those pages and all of those platforms. Leave us a like, a subscribe, a heart, whatever this thing is that you're supposed to do on that particular social media platform that gives us more followers and gives us more traffic and more views. Do that. I mean, or do something that gives us less traffic and less views if you want. I don't know, freedom of choice, I guess. But anyways, go leave a like and a share everywhere you can. Help spread the word that we are doing of the good work that we are doing here. I think it's pretty good work that we're doing here at Winnipeg Alternative Media and the Mactown Smackdown. So go and leave a like and a share everywhere you can. It really helps out. It really helps spread the word and help us grow and get a bigger audience and help to reach out to and communicate to more people. But on the increasingly good chance that either of our platform or either of our pages, either the Mactown Smackdown or Winnipeg Alternative Media, gets censored, or shall we say removed, or memory hold on any of those platforms. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter would probably be the first ones I would be worried about. You can find everything Winnipeg Alternative Media backed up and archived on winnipegalternativemedia.ca. So you can go and check out our website there. It's got all of our past live streams, articles, etc. It's all there. So again, like I said, even if we get taken down off of Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, which is looking increasingly likely as time goes on with the way things are going, you can still go to winnipegalternativemedia.ca to get your fix for all things Wham. And while you're there, we already mentioned liking and sharing and subscribing and everything is a great way to support Winnipeg Alternative Media. And another really fantastic way to support Winnipeg Alternative Media would be to do so in a more, shall we say, for a blunt way of putting it, financial sense. Winnipeg Alternative Media is completely run by volunteers here. We don't get paid one red hot cent to do the work that we do here. We do it out of the goodness of our hearts and out of our own time and out of our own wallets because we think it's important work that needs to be done. And we either don't see anybody else doing it or we don't see anybody else doing it as well as we think we could. So here we all are. But That being said, despite the fact that we are all volunteers here at Winnipeg Alternative Media, there are a few costs and expenses here and there to keep the lights on and keep the shows going and keep churning out the great content that you've come to know and love. So while you're at our website, winnipegalternativemedia.ca, there are two ways that you can support us financially if you have obviously the ability to do so without putting yourself out of sorts. We don't want anybody to give away money that they need. You can either go to winnipegalternativemedia.ca/donate and just leave us a few dollars, leave us a few shekels. It would be much appreciated. We might even start to give people shout outs on the live streams as a way of thanking them if they feel okay with that. Or the way that I usually encourage people to show their support, because they also get something in return, is to go to winnipegalternativemedia.ca and get your hands on some sweet Winnipeg Alternative Media branded merch. We have t-shirts, we have pullover hoodies, we have zip-up hoodies, we have crop tops, we have children's clothing. Pretty much any article of clothing that you can think of that you might want to get the Winnipeg Alternative Media logo printed on, you can get it printed on. Either go to winnipegalternativemedia.ca, and I believe there should be a link at the homepage for how you can get your hands on your merch and just some of the more standard stuff that we offer, the t-shirts and tank tops and hoodies. Or if you want some more specialty items, you can reach out to us through winnipegaltmedia@gmail.com. That's the email address at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen right now. And you can just reach out to us directly and we will set something up for you. And like I said, we can get the Winnipeg Alternative Media logo printed on pretty much any item of clothing that you can think of. So those are two amazing ways that you can help to show some direct financial support to Winnipeg Alternative Media. And like I said, help keep the lights on. You can either go to winnipegalternativemedia.ca/donate. Alex, our host, or our producer, I should say, co-host and producer, says if you donate, I might be able to get a mobile internet stick and we would have less issues when I travel. See, there you go. This is what we're talking about. This is how you can help us, because like I said, we're all volunteers. So if we were going to get an internet stick for ourselves, we'd be paying for it out of pocket. We don't have like a budget, so to speak. So if you donated enough money, we could get Alex a mobile internet stick so that he can travel all he wants and we can still bring you shows uninterrupted, no glitches, no delays. So just throwing that out there. Or you can get your hands on some sweet winnipegalternativemedia.ca or some Winnipeg Alternative Media branded merch. And like I said, that's usually the way that I encourage people to do so, because it helps show us financial support and you get some sweet branded merch and swag in return for yourself. One last thing before we jump into tonight's show. Everything that we are about to cover, all the articles we're going to read, the videos that we're going to watch, all the whatever that I'm going to reference, all the resources that I've used to put together tonight's show, I'm going to link them all to the Winnipeg Alternative Media Discord server immediately following the show tonight. And that link should be showing up at the bottom of the screen in just a second or two here, assuming Alex hasn't died, assuming Alex's internet hasn't died on him. But one way or another, we will get the Winnipeg Alternative Media Discord. There it is. The Discord server link is right there. So go and join the Winnipeg Alternative Media Discord server, and then go to the Media Watchdog Weekly channel specifically. And there you will be able to find all of the links and resources that I used and referenced tonight to put together tonight's show. And I highly encourage everyone every week that I do one of these to go and check out these resources for themselves. Read the articles for yourselves, watch the videos for yourselves, think about it, come to your own conclusions, make your own decisions, and live your own life. Because that's ultimately what we're here to encourage people to do at Media Watchdog Weekly, the MacTown Smackdown, Winnipeg Alternative Media. We're not here to try to really push any sort of agenda unless you consider freedom of speech and free thought and freedom of choice and pro-choice an agenda, which I guess it is technically, but as far as agendas go, it's a pretty good one, as I think. But we here at Media Watchdog Weekly, MacTown Smackdown, Winnipeg Alternative Media, more than anything, are just here to present information as objectively as possible in as unbiased a way as possible. Obviously, I'm still not perfect, but I'm working on it. We're getting there. And just encourage people to use this information to make their own decisions and live their own life. Because like I just said, we're pretty pro-choice and pro-freedom of choice on pretty much every topic. So now that is all taken care of and out of the way, all the housekeeping and announcements and show notes and all that stuff. So I'm going to set my notebook with all that stuff aside, and we are going to jump into tonight's opening segment as soon as I take one quick sip of water here. Oh, we have a quick question. Before I forget, how can one correct someone else's mistake if principle number 1 says don't criticize, condemn, or complain? I haven't finished the book, but I'm having trouble applying that one. I'm assuming you're talking about the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. You're welcome for the show, by the way. It says, how can one correct someone else's mistakes if principle number 1 says don't criticize, condemn, or complain? Well, Jenny, you're just going to have to stay tuned because luckily for you, that is pretty much the topic of tonight's entire show, is how to communicate to people in a way that they will actually be receptive to what you have to say and not just want to turn around and run away screaming. Oh, Dale Carnegie. So this must be how to win friends and influence people then. Good. We were, like I said, you're just going to have to stay tuned and pay attention. Because we're going to get to that tonight. That is the topic of tonight's show, is how to be a better communicator and like how to communicate to people in such a way that they're going to actually be, like I said, receptive to what you have to say and not just want to dig their heels in even further. But before we get to that, thank you for that perfect question that teased the main topic of tonight's show. We have our opening segment that we need to get through real quick. As you know by now, if you've been watching the show for a while, we like to open our live streams with either a good news everyone segment, a fact-checking the fact-checkers segment, which we haven't done one of those in a really long time. I'm going to have to come up with one of those for the next show maybe. And this week, we are back to our Told You So segment, or the I hate to say I told you so segment. And we have a great article that we're going to go through together. If Mr. Ferguson over in Alberta could hit my intro clip to play me into my segment, please. Again, Apollo.
I told you so. Told you so. Told you so. Told you so.
See, that's the thing about delays, is you never know how.
I told you so. Told you so. Told you so. Told you so.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Good enough. We don't need to play it again. This delay is awkward enough as it is. We have to do that at least one more time before we get out of this segment, so let's just leave it there for now. Alex says he's reloading, so he'll be back in just a second, so that's perfect. So I have shared my screen with Alex, but he might not be able to pull this up right away, but it's a fairly lengthy article. So, and again, like I said, I'm going to take this article and post the link to it in the Discord server immediately following the show tonight. So if you would like to read it for yourself, you are more than welcome to do so, and I even highly encourage you to do so. But for now, let us just go through it together, and hopefully Alex can jump back in here fairly quickly and share my screen so that you can read everything along with me and just have the peace of mind that I'm not just making stuff up as I go. Now, this article is from the National Post from July 30th, 2021, which is 3 days ago. And the headline reads, "Vaccinated people spreading Delta variant just as quickly as the unvaccinated, according to leaked CDC document. The variant is so contagious that it spreads among vaccinated people in a July 4th outbreak in Provincetown, Massachusetts, a genetic analysis shows." From Washington, "The Delta variant of the coronavirus appears to cause more severe illness than earlier variants and spreads as easily as chickenpox, according to an internal federal health document that argues officials must, quote, acknowledge the war has changed." Real quick note before we move on, I've read this article a few times now. Chickenpox, I think, is a poor disease or affliction, whatever you want to call it, to compare the coronavirus to, because when you say the severe illness spreads as easily as chickenpox, to me what that means is that one of the things that the chickenpox is most famous for is that you catch it once, hopefully as a kid, and then you never have to worry about it again. So again, people might be subconsciously making that connection. So maybe chickenpox isn't the best disease to compare this to if you're trying to drive home the severity of it. Because again, chickenpox is most famous for you catch it once as a kid and it's rough for like a week or so, and then you never catch it again and you're immune for life. Reading on. The document is an internal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention slide presentation shared within the CDC and obtained by the Washington Post. It captures the struggle of the nation's top public health agency to persuade the public to embrace vaccination and prevention measures, including mask wearing, as cases surge across the United States and new research suggests vaccinated people can spread the virus. Oh, I hate these stupid pop-up windows. The document strikes an urgent note, revealing that the agency knows it must revamp its public messaging to emphasize vaccination as the best defense against a variant so contagious that it acts almost like a different novel virus, leaping from target to target more swiftly than Ebola or the common cold. Now, glossing over the whole comparison of coronavirus to Ebola and the common cold, which we were told for the better part of a year and a half you weren't allowed to do. You weren't allowed to compare it to the common cold or to the common flu, because it's definitely not. So you're not allowed to even remotely compare it in any way. Putting all that aside, if the new variant is so contagious that it acts almost like a different novel virus, how is encouraging more people to get vaccinated supposed to help? Because the vaccine is for the SARS-CoV-2 virus. If this new variant is so contagious that it acts like a new novel virus, that would make it the SARS-CoV-3 virus, which would ultimately, logically, to me at least, mean that these vaccines are essentially useless in offering you protection from this specific variant. And yet they're still saying that they need to revamp public messaging to emphasize vaccination as the best defense against a variant so contagious that it acts almost like a different novel virus, meaning that the vaccines won't really protect you against it, which they then basically go on to admit in the rest of this article. The document cites a combination of recently obtained, still unpublished data from outbreak investigations and outside studies showing that vaccinated individuals infected with the Delta variant may be able to transmit the virus as easily as those who are unvaccinated. Vaccinated people infected with the Delta variant have measurable viral loads similar to those who are unvaccinated and infected with the variant. Pardon me. Quote, I finished reading it significantly more concerned than when I began. Robert Wachter, I'm going to go with Wachter on this one. Robert Wachter, chairman of the Department of Medicine at the University of California at San Francisco, wrote in an email. Skipping over that, CDC scientists were so alarmed by the new research that the agency earlier this week significantly changed guidances for vaccinated people even before making new data public, which is a point that we're going to come back to later in this very article. The data and studies cited in the document played a key role in revamped recommendations that call for everyone, vaccinated or not, to wear masks indoors in public settings in certain circumstances, a federal health official said. That official told the Post that the data will be published in full on Friday. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky privately briefed members of Congress on Thursday, drawing on much of the material in the document. One of the slides states that there is a higher risk among older age groups for hospitalization and death relative to younger people, regardless of vaccination status. So this whole make sure you get vaccinated and make sure your grandparents get vaccinated so that you don't accidentally kill grandma and grandpa with the virus doesn't really seem to hold up anymore, because as it says right here, there is a higher risk among older age groups for hospitalization and death relative to younger people, regardless of vaccination status. Another estimates that there are 35,000 symptomatic infections per week among 162 million vaccinated Americans. The document outlines, quote, communication challenges fueled by cases in vaccinated people, including concerns from local health departments about whether coronavirus vaccines remain effective, and a, quote, public convinced vaccines no longer work / booster doses are needed. Well, I can understand why the public would be convinced vaccines are no longer work if the local health departments aren't even convinced that they're effective anymore. It makes perfect sense to me, since again, we've been spending a year and a half now being told to just trust your local health agencies, trust your local health department, trust your local health experts. Now it's saying right here, well, we have no idea why the public is convinced that the vaccines aren't effective anymore, even though the local health departments aren't convinced that the vaccines are effective anymore. The presentation highlights the daunting task that the CDC faces. It must continue to emphasize the proven efficacy of the vaccines at preventing severe illness and death, while acknowledging milder breakthrough infections may not be so rare after all, and that vaccinated individuals are transmitting the virus. Remember earlier when they said that vaccinated individuals can transmit the virus? Now, just a few paragraphs later, that has changed to vaccinated individuals are transmitting the virus. The agency must move the goalposts of success in full public view. And they put that in there like it's a big deal, like they haven't been doing that for a year and a half already. So now I want to focus in on this paragraph right here, basically, because this is kind of the whole thought that brought me to bringing this article up as the opening topic for tonight. The CDC must continue to emphasize the proven efficacy of the vaccines at preventing severe illness and death, while acknowledging milder breakthrough infections may not be so rare after all, and that vaccinated individuals are transmitting the virus. So ultimately, to me at least, and feel free to disagree with me here, my interpretation of that sentence and that paragraph is that getting vaccinated is not about helping to protect others and helping to keep others safe anymore. Because if you can transmit the virus to people, and whether you're vaccinated or not, and you can catch the virus, whether you're vaccinated or not, you're not really protecting anybody except yourself. Because as they say, the vaccines are still, quote, proven effective at preventing severe illness and death, which I think even that is really going to be called into question over a long enough period of time. Little prediction, but you never really know. We'll see how it plays out. So they are saying that the vaccines are still proven effective at preventing severe illness and death, but they're acknowledging that milder breakthrough infections are not so rare and that vaccinated individuals are transmitting the virus. So now, at this point, to me at least, my interpretation of this is that we have to admit as a society that the whole getting vaccinated thing is no longer, if it ever was, about helping to, quote, protect others and keep public health and safety at the forefront, basically. At this point, it seems like the only person you're really protecting by getting vaccinated is yourself, which is fine. If that's still a good enough reason for you to go and get the vaccine, and that's what makes you go get the vaccine, by all means, go ahead. I don't really care one way or another. Like I said at the top of the show, pro freedom of choice. If you want to get the vaccine, go get the vaccine. If you don't want to get the vaccine, however, you shouldn't be forced to get the vaccine. But as I was saying, pretty much the only person you're protecting now by getting the vaccine is yourself, because you can still spread it around to other people, even if you're vaccinated or not, and the other people can still catch it and still get infected by it, whether they're vaccinated or not. So the only person you're protecting by getting vaccinated really is yourself. But as they mentioned earlier in the article, there's still a higher risk of death from the virus in the older age groups, regardless of vaccination status. So like I said, you at this point, you're lucky if you're protecting yourself with getting vaccinated. But we have to pretty much admit as a society at this point that the whole getting vaccinated thing is no longer about helping to, quote, protect other people, if it ever was in the first place. The CDC has declined to comment. Jesus, I wonder why. Quote, although it's rare, we believe that at an individual level, vaccinated people may spread the virus, which is why we updated our recommendation, according to the federal health official who spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly. Quote, waiting even days to publish the data could result in needless suffering, and as public health professionals, we cannot accept that. The presentation came 2 days after Walensky announced the reversal in guidance on masking among people who are vaccinated. So the CDC director, Walensky was the CDC director, I believe. CDC director Rochelle Walensky, yes. So CDC director Rochelle Walensky gave the, whatever you want to call it, medical edict that now you have to wear masks indoors in certain situations and in certain places, regardless of vaccination status. And then it wasn't until 2 days later that she even explained to the government why she made that recommendation. And then I believe it was still a few more days after that until they actually released the data to the public. So yeah. And again, we're going to come to that in just a second here. The presentation came 2 days after Walensky announced the reversal in guidance on masking among people who are vaccinated. On May 13th, people were told they no longer needed to wear masks indoors or outdoors if they had been vaccinated. The new guidance reflects a strategic retreat in the face of the Delta variant. Even people who are vaccinated should wear masks indoors in communities with substantial viral spread, or when in the presence of people who are particularly vulnerable to infection and illness, the CDC said. The document presents new science, but also suggests a new strategy is needed on communication, noting that public trust in vaccines may be undermined when people experience or hear about breakthrough cases. Yeah, it's because you've been gaslighting us this whole time about the fact that these breakthrough cases are super rare. And especially down in the United States, the agenda and the narrative for the last couple of weeks or the last few weeks has been, this has now become a pandemic of the unvaccinated. But if you know anything about how the CDC changed their guidelines for testing people who had been vaccinated for COVID, it would make perfect sense that you are now experiencing a pandemic of the unvaccinated, because you're only testing vaccinated people for COVID-19 when they're already needing to go to the hospital. But that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. Public trust in vaccines may be undermined when people experience or hear about breakthrough cases, especially after public health officials have described them as rare. Yeah, that's what I just said. We've been getting gaslit for the past year and a half about how these things are super rare. And now they're coming out and saying, yeah, they're actually not as rare as we thought they were. And now everybody needs to wear masks again. Matthew Seeger, a risk communication expert at Wayne State University in Detroit, said a lack of communication about breakthrough infections has proved problematic. Because public health officials had emphasized the great efficacy of the vaccines, the realization that they aren't perfect may feel like a betrayal. Quote, "We've done a great job of telling the public that these are miracle vaccines," Seeger said. "We have probably fallen a little into the trap of over-reassurance, which is one of the challenges of any crisis communication circumstance. And this is why honesty and transparency is the key. That is how you build trust with people, is honesty, as much honesty and transparency as you can afford to give without causing a panic. You don't censor things. You don't keep things behind closed doors. You don't tell people, just trust us. We know what's best for you. You come at them with as much honesty and transparency as you can afford without causing a panic or posing a risk to anybody's security. The CDC's revised mask guidance stops short of what the internal document calls for. Quote, "Given higher transmissibility and current vaccine coverage, universal masking is essential to reduce the transmission of the Delta variant," it states. Yeah, because masking did such a great job at helping to stop the spread of all the other variants. The document makes clear that vaccination provides substantial protection against the virus, but it also states that the CDC must, quote, "improve communications around individual risk among the vaccinated." Yes, I could not possibly agree more. Like I just said, be more open and honest and transparent with people about the actual risks and protection that you get from these things, because that risk depends on a host of factors, including age and whether someone has a compromised immune system. The document includes CDC data from studies showing that vaccines are not as effective in immunocompromised patients and nursing home residents, raising the possibility that some at-risk individuals will need an additional vaccine dose. Called it. The presentation includes a note that the findings and conclusions are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the CDC's official position. The internal document contains some of the scientific information that influenced the CDC to change its mask guidance. The agency faced criticism from outside experts this week when it changed the mask guidance without releasing the data, a move that violated scientific norms, said Kathleen Hall Jameson, director of the Annenberg Public Policy Center at the University of Pennsylvania. Quote, "You don't, when you're a public official, want to be saying, 'Trust us, we know, we just can't tell you how,'" Jameson said. Yeah, the scientific norm suggests that when you make a statement based on science, you show the science, i.e. show your work, the thing that was hammered into all of us through the 18 years of public schooling that most of us went through. And the second mistake is that they do not appear to be candid about the extent to which breakthroughs are yielding hospitalizations. Yeah, they just haven't been honest. So we're not going to go any further because this article keeps going for a few more paragraphs, but we've covered all the most important topics here. And like I said, I'm going to post this article in the Discord server after the show tonight, so you can go and read the whole thing for yourself if you are so inclined. And I highly encourage you to do so. Long story short, though, quick sip of water here. As we covered in the article, people that are vaccinated are spreading the new Delta variant of the virus just as frequently as people who are unvaccinated, which means that you can now be infected by and killed by and still transmit the virus despite the fact that you're vaccinated, which means that now it's no longer about protecting other people. It's just about protecting yourself, because as of right now, they're still trying to convince people that at the very least, these vaccines will reduce your risk of a severe infection and death. But they also admit that that might very well not be true for people who are immunocompromised or the elderly. At this point, they're saying taking the vaccine is basically like just mental insurance or like peace of mind type insurance. They don't really know for sure whether or not it's going to protect you. You can, if you're elderly or immunocompromised, you can still transmit it to other people. You can still catch it even if you're vaccinated. You can still die from it even if you're vaccinated. Your risk reduction isn't even really that good if you're elderly or immunocompromised. So, I mean, and this is kind of why we brought this as the opening article tonight. The quote-unquote tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists have been talking about this for a while now, about how these vaccines probably aren't as effective as we are being told. The safety studies and efficacy studies were probably likely fudged, and there were a lot of corners cut because these pharmaceutical companies that did these tests and did these studies and made these vaccines also provide a lot of the funding for the health agencies like the CDC and the FDA and all those people. So there's just massive conflict of interest there. But again, for a while now, tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists have been calling vaccines aren't as effective as what we're being told. You can still spread the virus. You can still get infected by the virus. You can still die from the virus. And in certain groups, like it's not even really offering that much protection or risk reduction from the virus itself, especially because of this new Delta variant. So I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. And with that said, Alex, if you could hit that clip for me one last time and play us out here, please and thank you. We are going to jump into the main chunk of tonight's show. Again, folks, apologies for the delay. If Alex has disconnected here, I might just have to carry on myself. Pardon me. Alex is having issues. Okay, I'm just going to stop screen sharing for a second here then, and I'm just going to carry on by myself in the meantime. So don't worry about playing the outro clip anymore, Alex. I already said the punchline to it anyways. I hate to say I told you so, but I freaking told you so. The conspiracy theorists were right again. And so anyways, now.
I told you so. Told you so. Told you so. Told you so. Gotta go, love you. Call me tomorrow.
There we go. I guess it works. Right on. Okay, so now moving on into the main segment of tonight's show. We're just about 30 minutes in, so that's perfect. That gives me just about an hour to get through tonight's topic, which is right about where I want to be. That's pretty good. I thought I ranted and raved about that article for a lot longer than that. So I'm glad to know that I'm still more or less on schedule. Now, as I mentioned earlier, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's topic is going to be a part 1 of 2 again, because it's really hard to condense this topic down into a 60 to 90 minute live stream podcast, whatever you want to call it. So I had to split it up into 2 parts, which I did with the Logical Fallacies podcast as well. Tonight's topic is going to be tips for better, more effective, more influential communication. Originally, I wanted to call this live stream how to communicate with people so that they actually want to give a shit about what you say and not just run away screaming. But that's quite a mouthful. So I wanted to condense it down. So ultimately what I came up with was tips for better, more effective communication, or something along those lines. It's shorter, it's catchier, it rolls off the tongue better. Anyways, tonight we are going to go over 6 tips that I have learned and used in my own personal life. What's with the comments about the triangles all of a sudden? I had a dream on August 2nd. Okay, this is like a thread of comments that I missed the first few of. Okay, I'm just going to carry on then. Tonight is reasons or tips number 1 through 6 of things that I've learned and things that I use in my personal life and things that I encourage other people to use in their personal lives for how to become a more effective communicator and a more influential communicator, how to communicate in such a way that, like I said, people actually want to listen to what you have to say and might actually consider your way of thinking and might actually be persuaded to come around to your side of things, if that is indeed your goal with conversation. Which, actually, now that I say that, is a very nice segue into tip number 1, which I have labeled as stop trying to win communication. Stop trying to win communication. The point of communication, I'm going to start with this because this is probably the most important tip that I have. Like I said, these are in no particular order of like ranked importance. Number 1 is most important and number 6 is least important. They're not in any real particular order. But when I was sitting down and brainstorming my list of ways and tips that I could give people to become a better communicator, this was immediately the first one that I wrote down because it's the one that I think I see the most commonly. Again, stop trying to win communication. The purpose of communication is to come to a deeper mutual understanding of truth and reality and logic and reasoning. The point of conversation is not to determine who is right, who is wrong, who's smart, who's dumb. That's what debates are for. And most conversation is not supposed to be a debate. It's like the whole fingers, thumbs, all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs type of thing. All debates are conversations, but not all conversations are meant to be or should be debates. So stop trying to win at communication unless you are in a debate and you know you're in a debate going in, and your opponent or the person, the other conversationalist, also knows that you're going into a debate going in. Don't just start a debate without letting the other person know. That's not the point of communication. Like I said earlier, the point of communication, real communication, and not just trying to yell your points over the other person, the point of real, deep communication and discourse between two or more people is that you want to come to a deeper mutual understanding of, like I said, truth and reality and reason and logic. So I'm going to read a brief snippet from How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is why I told everybody to read this book, if possible, on one of my previous live streams. I believe even two of my previous live streams. In my recommendations segment, I recommended that people read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And that's because I'm going to be referencing it a lot tonight to kind of just use. He has awesome little, even though this book was written in 1936 and it's a lot of the references are outdated, he has a lot of really good stories and anecdotes and references to help kind of drive home the point of how important or why he includes these points that he includes. Wow. Welcome back, Alex. So we are going to read from, what was it, page 108. So this is from the chapter titled "You Can't Win an Argument." Oh yeah, no, we wanted to start. Where was I? Buddha said, quote, "Hatred is never ended by hatred, but by love. And a misunderstanding is never ended by an argument, but by tact, diplomacy, conciliation, and a sympathetic desire to see the other person's viewpoint." I'll repeat that again. Hatred is solved by a misunderstanding is never ended by an argument, but by tact, diplomacy, conciliation, and a sympathetic desire to see the other person's viewpoint, which is another tip that we're going to get to in just a bit here. Abraham Lincoln once reprimanded a young army officer for indulging in a violent controversy with an associate. Quote, "No man who is resolved to make the most of himself can spare time for personal contention," Lincoln said. "Still less can he afford to take the consequences, including the vitiation of his temper." Oh yeah, I meant to look that word up. Let's do that right now, shall we? I'm just going to quickly look up the definition of the word vitiation. I meant to do that earlier. Sorry, folks. Okay, vitiation means... No, that's visitation. I want vitiation, a change in a process that impairs utility or reduces efficiency. Okay, so it makes you stupid, basically. The loss of his temper, basically, and the loss of self-control. Yield larger things to which you show no more than equal rights, and yield lesser ones, though clearly your own. I really want people to listen to this part in particular. So if you kind of zoned out here, this is your chance for me to kind of snap you back into it so that you hear this last bit, because it's the best bit. Better to give your path to a dog than be bitten by him in contesting for the right. Even killing the dog would not cure the bite. Therefore, Carnegie says, rule number 1 is the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. So like I said, the title that I came up for this first tip is stop trying to win communication. Stop trying to score points on people. And the real life example that I come up with this, because for this list here, I tried to come up with an example from one of the sources that I referenced in order to make the list. And I also wanted to come up with a real life example or an example from my own personal life. And the real life example that I came up with for this about how people usually tend to turn communication into an argument is just look at 90% of all social media comment sections. 90% or more, maybe 90% is being super generous of social media comment sections is just people telling each other they're stupid, trying to score points on one another, trying to leave the comment that's going to get the most likes, trying to like one up one another, trying to essentially win the comment section. And again, that is not the purpose of communication. The purpose of communication is to come to a deeper mutual understanding of truth and reality, not to win, not to score points on people, not to prove people wrong, but to come to a deeper mutual understanding of truth and reality. So stop trying to win at communication is tip number 1. Quick sip of water here, and then we'll move on to number 2. Tip number 2, I stole the title for this one, or the title that I gave it is basically a title that I stole from another book that I've recommended you read recently, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Tip number 2 for how to be a better communicator is be impeccable with your word and avoid criticism if at all possible. I'm going to quickly screen share here again. Hopefully Alex is back again and can help me out here. Close that. Close
Anything
that.
for you, bro. Anything for you.
Awesome. He's back. Okay, so I'm pulling up. This is a slide here from some internet presentation or other that is a summary of the book, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's a very short book. It takes like an hour to read from cover to cover because it's a very simple book. The concepts in it are very simple. And this tip that I just gave you, be impeccable with your word, as I said, is basically ripped right from Ruiz's book. Be impeccable with your word. And they break it down into some subcategories here. Being impeccable with your word means speaking with integrity, saying only what you mean, avoiding using your word to speak against yourself or others, or to gossip about others, and try as best you can to only use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. And this ties back into reason number 1 again, which is stop trying to win at communication, because the purpose of communication is to use your words, use the power of your word, as Ruiz says, in the direction of truth and love, coming to a deeper mutual understanding of truth, love, and reality. Not winning, not one-upping people, not trying to score points on one another in an internet comment section. We're just going to quickly stop screen sharing again here because I don't need that anymore. So my little input that I'm going to add to this in the whole be impeccable with your word part, and especially the avoiding criticism part. So this year, Jenny, if you're listening, this one's for you. Even if you know someone is wrong, don't start by telling them that they are wrong. You can eventually work your way around to telling someone if they're wrong, especially if you know for a fact that they're wrong. But when I say know for a fact that they're wrong, you need to really, really, really know for a fact 100% that they're wrong. If you're going to tell someone outright that they're wrong, you need to be 100% certain that you are right and they are wrong. However, even in that instance, if you are 100% right and they are 100% wrong and you know it 100%, never start by telling someone that they're wrong. Never start by telling someone that you're going to school them or that you're going to teach them something or that you're going to prove something to them. You're not a teacher grading someone's test. You're not a professor giving a lecture to a bunch of students who paid to come and see him. So stop acting like one. If anything, you start by praising the person. Try to find something that they said that you agree with or that you can sympathize with or that you can empathize with. Or just do your best to find something that you can find common ground on and praise them on is a great way to start. And then, like I said, you can slowly work your way around through using some of these other communication tips to get the person a little less defensive, to eventually tell them that they're wrong. But especially right off the bat, avoid criticizing someone or telling them that they're wrong or telling them what is wrong with them, because it really puts them on the defensive, really makes them dig their heels in, and really makes them want to not listen to what you have to say. And I imagine you, viewer, watching right now, the same is true for you. When you may potentially get confronted, whether in real life or in internet comment sections, by the people who are pro-vaccine, pro-lockdown, whatever, and they start off by calling you a conspiracy theorist or an anti-vaxxer or a tinfoil hatter or whatever, an idiot, a COVIDiot, whatever they want to call you. If someone comes at you that way, telling you right off the bat that you're wrong and that you're an idiot and they're going to school you in what's right, you're not going to want to listen to that person. I know I wouldn't want to listen to that person if that's how they start off. So why would you expect that it would be any different if the roles were reversed and you were the one doing the talking and they were the one doing the listening? If you come at them calling them a sheep, calling them a sleeper, calling them a slave, telling them that they're an idiot, telling them how wrong they are, and then you move into telling them why, they're not going to want to listen to you no matter how right you are and no matter how wrong they are. So again, to help kind of drive this point home about why you should try to avoid criticism and be impeccable with your word, we're going to turn to win friends and influence people. This time we're turning to page 160, which is right here. This is from chapter 10, an appeal that everybody likes, from 12 ways to win people to your way of thinking, which is part 3 of the book. Again, you got to read this book. I highly recommend it. It's amazing. Okay. Let's take the case of Hamilton J. Farrell of the Farrell Mitchell Company of Glenolden, Pennsylvania. Mr. Farrell had a disgruntled tenant who threatened to move. So this man is a landlord and he has a tenant who is threatening to move out. The tenant's lease still had 4 months on the bill at $55 a month. Keep in mind that this was back in the 1940s. So $55 a month was probably a decent amount of money back then. Where was I? The tenant's lease, $55 a month. Nevertheless, he served notice that he was vacating immediately, regardless of the lease. Quote, "These people had lived in my house all winter, the most expensive part of the year," Mr. Farrell said as he told the story to the class. "And I knew it would be difficult to rent the apartment again before the fall. I could see $220 going over the hill. And believe me, I saw red." Again, keep in mind, this is 1940s, so $220 was a lot of money back then. $220 is still a lot of money to me nowadays. That's groceries for a couple of weeks. Quote, "Now, ordinarily, I would have waded into that tenant and advised him to read his lease again. I would have pointed out that if he moved, the full balance of his rent would fall due at once and that I could and would move to collect. However, instead of flying off the handle and making a scene, I decided to try other tactics. So I started like this. 'Mr. Doe,' I said, 'I have listened to your story, and I still don't believe that you intend to move. Years in the renting business have taught me something about human nature, and I sized you up in the first place as being a man of your word. In fact, I'm so sure of it that I'm willing to take the gamble. Here's my proposition. Lay your decision on the table for a few days and think it over. If you come back to me between now and the first of the month when your rent is due and tell me that you still intend to move, I give you my word that I will accept your decision as final. I will privilege you to move and admit to myself that I have been wrong in my judgment. But I still believe you're a man of your word and will live up to your contract. For, after all, we are either men or monkeys, and the choice usually lies within ourselves.' Well, when the new month came around, this gentleman came and paid his rent in person. He and his wife had talked it over, he said, and decided to stay. They concluded that the only honorable thing to do was to live up to their lease." So, again, great example of how you can try to use a slightly different tactic than telling someone that they are wrong right off the bat. Again, telling someone that they're wrong right off the bat, telling someone that they're an idiot right off the bat, telling someone that they're a sheeple right off the bat, not a great way to get people to listen to your points or listen to your arguments. But more so than that, another excellent point that is brought up in that story is a great way, a really, really great way to get people to kind of open up to you and be more receptive to what you have to say and trust you a little bit, is to give them a reputation to live up to. In that little story that I just read from the book, the landlord said numerous times over the course of his conversation with this tenant, "I summed you up. I sized you up when I first saw you as a man of your word. I see you as being a man of honor, and I don't think you're going to back down on this because we're either men or monkeys, and the choice between the two lies within ourselves. And I see you as choosing to be a man." So that is a very effective way to get people on your side right off the bat, is you give them a good reputation to live up to. Listen, I know you're a smart guy. I know you're a smart woman. I know that you can think critically about this if you really stop and give yourself the chance. I know that you can tell. I know you smell bullshit when you smell it. Give them a reputation to live up to rather than telling them, "Oh, you're such an idiot. How can you not smell this bullshit that's right under your nose?" You say, "I know that you have a good nose for bullshit. Let's look at this together," because then people are like, "Oh, well, this person just paid me a compliment. They just praised me. Maybe I should listen to what they have to say because they clearly like me." So that, ladies and gentlemen, is tip number 2. Be impeccable with your word and avoid criticism. And I guess a little sub note would be praise people and give them a good reputation to live up to, because it puts them on your side right away. I know you're a smart person who's capable of figuring this out. Who's going to object to that? Who's going to argue with that? Nobody. Who's going to stand there, let someone who they're having a conversation or a debate with go, I know that you're a smart guy. And who's going to stand there and go, no, I'm not. You don't know me. Nobody, or hardly anybody, unless they're going for a laugh, which I can totally understand. So again, that's tip number 2. Be impeccable with your word and avoid criticism, and give people a good reputation to live up to early on in the conversation to get them on your side. Again, I'm going to take a quick sip of water here. Now, moving on to tip number 3. This one could have very easily gone at the top of the list. Again, like I said, I didn't put these in any particular order, but if I was going to put them in a particular order, this one would have been very near the top of the list, if not right at the top of the list. Tip number 3 is, again, basically a title that's ripped right from Carnegie's book. Be interested, not interesting. I'm going to say that again, just so that it kind of really sinks in. Be interested, not interesting. Now, what do I mean by that? This quote sums it up very nicely. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time, and it's something that I repeat to myself all the time, because as a personal trainer and as like a lifestyle coach, I need to be an effective communicator. I need to be able to communicate these concepts and these ideas and this knowledge to people in a way that they're going to be able to receive it, process it, and put it to use in their own life. So a quote that I tell myself over and over and over again as a way to initially build rapport and build trust with my clients is, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I'm going to say that again. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Unless the person you are talking to feels like you are genuinely interested in them and like them and are concerned with what they have to say, they're not going to give a shit about what you have to say. And why would they? If you clearly don't give a shit about what the other person has to say, why would they give a shit about what you have to say? So nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Take as sincere an interest as you possibly can in the other person or other people that you were talking to and what they have to say. And you make the person feel important. And we're going to come back to this again. The last tip on the list is about active listening, and we're going to go more into depth on that. So stay tuned for that. But you want to try as best you can to make the person that you are talking to feel important. And one of the ways that you can do that, probably the easiest and best way to do that, is to ask people questions about themselves. People love to talk about themselves more than pretty much anything else in the world. So let them. Ask them questions about themselves. Ask them why, especially a lot. That's going to be the next thing we get to real quick here. Ask the people questions about themselves. Get them talking about themselves. It builds rapport with them. It builds a relationship with them. It builds trust with them. Again, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Why would they give a shit about you and what you have to say if you don't give a shit about them and what they have to say? So take the initiative to establish that connection and establish that relationship of, I give a shit about what you and what you have to say. Then they will, if they are a even half decent person, reciprocate a lot of the time. So again, people, like I said, people love to talk about themselves. So ask them questions about themselves, get them talking about themselves, and it's a great way to build rapport. Now, again, for the example, we're going back to our trusty book here, Win Friends and Influence People, page 58, 59 this time. We're bouncing around all over the place in the book because, like I said, I didn't put these in order. So, of course, we're bouncing around all over the place in the book. Why should people be interested in you unless you are first interested in them? Reach for your pencil now and write your reply here. So basically he's asking, and I will ask here in the comments section, if you can, fill me in, ladies and gentlemen, why should someone give a shit about you and what you have to say if you don't give a shit about them and what they have to say? Can anybody give me an answer for that? Because I've read this book several times, and I've thought about that question a lot.
Because look at me. I'm amazing.
Okay. Thank you from the peanut gallery. Thank you, though, Alex. I'm glad. It sounds like your family's having a good time, so that makes me happy. But yeah, no, as like I said, I've read this book several times. I've thought about this question a lot, as I tend to think about questions a lot in general. And I can't think of a single good reason why someone would care about you and what you have to say if you don't first care about them and what they have to say. Someone has to take that initiative. So why not let it be you? Where was I? The New York Telephone Company. This is the example that I'm going to use to help drive home this point about people love to talk about themselves. So let them talk about themselves. The New York Telephone Company made a detailed study of telephone conversations to find out which word is the most frequently used. Any guesses on what the most frequently used word is in telephone conversations? Because I guarantee that this has not changed since the time that this book was written in 1936. The most common word is I, the personal pronoun I. I was used 3,990 times in 500 telephone conversations. When you see a group photograph that you are in, whose picture do you look for first? Your own. If you think people are interested in you, answer this question. If you died tonight, how many people would come to your funeral? Again, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So let people know that you care about them and what they have to say by asking them questions about themselves and getting them talking about themselves. It's the easiest way to do it because people love to talk about themselves. You ask them one question. If they're anything like me, you ask them one question about themselves and then you're in an hour and a half long conversation. That's how that can go sometimes. If we merely try to impress people and get people interested in us, we will never have many true, sincere friends. Friends, real friends, are not made that way. Napoleon tried it. And his last meeting with Josephine, he said, "Josephine, I have been as fortunate as any man ever was on this earth, and yet at this hour you are the only person in the world on whom I can rely." And historians doubt he could rely even on her. So yeah, I guess we would have to understand a little bit more about Napoleon. He kind of just leaves it there and moves on. So could have maybe gone into a little bit more detail on that little anecdote. But if you know anything about Napoleon, he was one of those iron fist type dudes. He was one of those I would rather be feared than respected type dudes. So that's why when it came time, when his whole thing was coming to an end, like he said, Josephine was the only person he felt like he can rely on. And now looking back, people don't think that, yeah, of course. Yeah, no, Jenny, I know. Yeah, I say I all the time. People love to talk about themselves. I'm not lying. I'm not making this stuff up. Dale Carnegie is way smarter than both of us. Don't get me wrong. No offense to you, Jenny. I know he's way smarter than me. So yeah, people love to talk about themselves. I say I all the goddamn time. That's why this is such a good tip. Be interested, not interesting. Get people talking about themselves. The real life example. Oh yeah, exactly. Like I was saying earlier, this is exactly how I build trust and build rapport and build relationships with my new personal training clients and my lifestyle coaching clients. I ask them questions about themselves. Like I said, if I want to teach these people something, people learn in a multitude of different ways. And there's a multitude of different ways that you can communicate with people and communicate to people that they're responsive and receptive to. So in order to figure out what the best way to teach these people, my new clients, is, I first have to learn stuff about them. So I ask them questions about themselves, about their family history, about their medical background, obviously, their physical background, what they do for fun, what pisses them off, what makes them happy. I gotta get inside their head and find out what makes them tick so that I can figure out the best way to communicate to them in a way that's going to be receptive. And I highly encourage you to do the same with just conversations in general. Get people to talk about themselves, gain a better understanding of the person that you're talking to and what makes them tick and why they do what they do, which we're going to get into in just a second here. And you will be able to communicate to them way more effectively because it's easier to communicate with people that you understand. So go in trying to gain, again, a deeper mutual understanding. That was tip number 1. Stop trying to win communication. Communication is about coming to a deeper mutual understanding. So come to a deeper mutual understanding of the people that you're communicating to, and you will be able to communicate to them more effectively. Now, sip of water, and we're going to move on to reason number 4. Yeah, exactly. Stephen Hayes, that's exactly right. There's that famous line about having a Napoleon complex. Yeah, Yeah, it's not a compliment. Let's put it that way. Now, there we are. I lost track of my tab for a second. Tip number 4. We're actually moving away from Dale Carnegie for once here, although we are going to come back to him. Don't worry. And we're going to jump now to one of the other resources that I referenced for putting together tonight's show. Tip number 4 is the name of a book that I believe I have also recommended, and if not, I am going to recommend it. It's a book named Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and that is also the title for tip number 4. Start with why. Find out why the other person wants what they want, or why they're saying what they're saying, and speak to that as much as you possibly can in conversation. All the who, what, when, where, how, all that stuff can come later, but why is always the most important. It's the most common question that kids ask, so don't be afraid to ask why and lean into the why. Now, to help kind of drive home the point of the reason that asking why and starting with why, especially keeping why in mind first and foremost at all times when in conversation, is so important. So I'm going to share my screen here again. Good. Having an Alex complex is the way to go. Geez, I wonder who left that comment. All it says is Winnipeg Alternative Media. But I wonder who possibly left that comment. Alex, are you still with me here? Are you able to pull up this video that I'm getting ready to show people?
Yes, I am.
Okay, cool.
And I was replying to Steven's comment about the Napoleon complex.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know. I was just saying, man, I wonder who might have left that comment. Okay, so now we're going to watch a short 5-minute video. It's going to be a little less than 5 minutes because I've sped up the play time just for the purposes of time and possibly copyright. This is a edited version of Simon Sinek's TED Talk, and this is TED Talk that he gave is the basis for what eventually became his book, Start With Why. And he really goes into a good amount of detail here on the core concept of why it is so important to keep why at the forefront of your mind when communicating with people.
I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat screen TVs. They've been making flat screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. When we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. You know, sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures, and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right, because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart, or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't the other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal?
Thank you, Simon. I could not have said it better myself. So again, the point that Simon is making in that video is that you start with why, because why is the thing that drives behavior. It's not the what or the how or the where or the when that really drives behavior on a deep, deep cognitive level. It's why, the limbic part of the brain that drives behavior. So that's why it's so important to dig down and dig into why the person that you may be conversing is saying what they're saying, why they believe what they believe, why they think what they think, and why they're doing what they're doing. And also keep that in mind from your side as well. That can help keep you very grounded and very stable and steady in a conversation, is remembering why you're having the conversation in the first place and remembering why you're communicating in the first place, which again, if you have good intentions, hopefully you're following tip number 1, which is the why you are communicating is to come to a deeper mutual understanding of truth and reality. That's why we communicate, ideally, is deeper mutual understanding. Again, it's not because of scoring points or not for winning and losing, unless it's a debate, in which case there is a winner and loser, but that's a whole thing. We went over that already. You start with why. Keep your own why in mind, why you are communicating and why you're saying the things that you're saying and why you're talking to this person in the first place. It helps keep you steady and stable and grounded in the conversation and keeps you from going off script and committing all kinds of like ad hominem logical fallacies and name calling and red herrings and straw mans and whatever. But also you have to figure out as much as you can why the other person that you're talking to is doing the things that they're doing, saying the things that they're saying, thinking the things that they're thinking, and you lean into that as much as you possibly can in the conversation. Now, a great way to do so is just to ask why. Like I was saying in the last tip, I believe, tip number 4, why is the most common question that kids ask. They ask why 1,000,000 times a day. And it's because they inherently, intuitively know what the most important question to start with. And somewhere along the lines, and I believe that 18 years worth of public schooling and public education has a lot to do with this, we have that why hammered out of us a lot of the time. But it's important that you bring it back into your world. Ask people when you're communicating with them. Ask them why. Why do you think that? Why do you believe that? Why do you behave this way? Why do you trust this person, that group, etc.? Ask why. Ask questions, and especially ask why, and then lean into that why. A lot of the time, the why for most people, regardless of what side, let's use the pandemic as a whole as an example here. Regardless of which side of the pandemic you fall on, either the pro-lockdown, pro-mask, pro-vaccine, pro-big government, or the pro-freedom of choice people, pro-freedom of whatever people, regardless of what side you're coming from, most people, the why that they're operating under is because we're scared and we want things to go back to either the way that they were or go back to a better way of being in general, basically. So it's important to keep in mind when you're potentially talking to either someone that is for the lockdowns and vaccines or someone who is against the lockdowns and vaccines, etc., to keep in mind that their why most likely isn't that they're like a tyrant or a communist and they want to control your life and tell you how to live. Most of the time, that why is just that they're scared and they're maybe a little angry and they want things to go back to some semblance of normalcy or sanity. So it's very important to keep that in mind. Start with why and lean into why as much as you possibly can over the course of the conversation. Like I said earlier, the who, what, when, where, how, all that stuff can come later. That's the accessories on your Apple computer. That's the features on your new car. That's the trimmings, the salad dressings, whatever. But the meat and potatoes of the conversation, as much as you possibly can muster it, should be why. Why are we having this conversation? Why do we think the things we think? Why do we believe the things we believe? Why do we trust the people that we trust? Why do we make the decisions that we make? So that's tip number 4. Start with why. I'm going to take another quick sip of water here, and we're going to jump into number 5. We're doing pretty well for time. I've got 15 minutes left to do 2 more, so that's pretty good. Tip number 5. Here we go. Decided to reload the page from the top all of a sudden. Tip number 5. I couldn't really, unfortunately, come up with a really catchy, snappy name for this one, but it is no less important. Tip number 5 is to be mindful of your nonverbal and vocal communication. Now, before I go any further, I feel like I should just explain what I mean by nonverbal and vocal communication. Nonverbal communication is like your facial expression, your body language, and then your vocal communication is like the tone of your voice, the volume of your voice, the speed and cadence at which you talk. So that is what I mean by nonverbal and vocal communication. It's basically everything outside of the actual words that you choose to use over the course of your conversation. And it is incredibly important to make sure that all 3 of those things line up when you're communicating with people, because if they don't, people just get this sense that something is off. Like, one of my favorite shows that I've started re-binging is Hell's Kitchen. And a lot of the time I laugh and complain that the words that are coming out, if anybody knows anything about Hell's Kitchen, it's Gordon Ramsay, who's the guy that's known for the British chef, who's known for just yelling and screaming at people for the most part. That's all his most famous clips are, is him just screaming at people for fucking things up. But then there are just the odd moments in his show, Hell's Kitchen, where someone does something really well and he compliments them and says, "Oh, that's absolutely outstanding." But his body language and his facial expression and the tone of his voice, he goes, "Hey, you, did you make that? It's fucking outstanding." And people are like, I don't know how to respond to that because your words are nice, but everything else about the way that you said it was so mean and aggressive. So that's why it's so important to make sure that your nonverbal and vocal communications and the words that you're using in your communication all actually line up. And now we're just going to quickly read through this article from the University of Texas Permian Basin website about how much of communication is nonverbal and why it is so important, just to kind of help drive the point home here. Quote, "We've all heard that 90% of communication is nonverbal, but is there any truth to this adage? When someone reads a transcript of a politician's impassioned speech, are they really missing out on the majority of the message? While the audience may get the essence of what's being said, there will always be something lost in translation when nonverbal communication isn't conveyed. Conversely, nonverbal communication can shed light on the hidden truth within a message. Information is no longer limited to print. It's delivered through social media, television, blogs, and other channels of communication. Professionals interested in a communications career have to concern themselves with not only what's being said, but how it is said. Let's take a look at how much communication is nonverbal and how professionals with a Bachelor of Arts in Communication can use nonverbal signals to better their personal and professional lives." So this article is not only going to break down how much of communication is nonverbal, why nonverbal communication is so important, but also tips on better nonverbal communication. I'm just going to take one quick sip of water. The 55-38-7 formula. The 90% figure wasn't plucked out of thin air. It was Albert Mehrabian, a researcher of body language, who first broke down the components of a face-to-face conversation. He found that communication is 55% nonverbal. Remember, that's your body language, facial expression, etc. 38% vocal, the tone, volume, speed, cadence of your voice, and 7% words only. I'm going to say that again. This dude, and we know that this isn't 100% accurate, but it's at least a good place to start. 7% of communication is the words that you use, which means that the other 93% comes from your body itself and the tone of your voice and the speed of your voice. This is where the idea that the vast majority of communication is nonverbal originated, but does this really mean that less than 10% of information is conveyed in spoken words? It turns out that the above formula was developed with a specific purpose in mind, comparing facial and vocal components to decipher a person's attitude. According to Mehrabian, quote, when there are inconsistencies between attitudes communicated verbally and posturally, meaning when your words and your body don't line up, the postural component should dominate in determining the total attitude that is inferred. Excuse me. Is 90% of communication nonverbal? No. Information is conveyed verbally, but in a face-to-face conversation, body language and facial expressions can have an incredible impact on how information is interpreted. In the Definitive Book of Body Language, Alan and Barbara Pease analyzed thousands of recorded sales negotiations from the 1970s and 1980s and found that body language accounted for the majority of the impact made negotiating. They also considered how the person with the strongest argument usually wins in negotiations over the phone, but not always in face-to-face conversations. I'm going to say that again. In face-to-face conversations, it is not always the person with the strongest argument that wins. Sometimes you can dominate or steer a conversation in the direction of your choosing with your body language and your vocal communication, regardless of whether or not you have the strong argument.
Because I'm fucking loud.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, being loud definitely doesn't hurt. But politicians are experts at this. They are experts at controlling the flow of conversation, regardless of whether or not they actually have a strong argument to make. I'm sure you've noticed. Where was I? Although the idea that 90% of communication is nonverbal can be put to rest, a person's body language and our first impression of them can heavily influence our decision-making. The power of body language. Now that we know what the importance, now that we know the important role nonverbal signals play in communication, how can we use body language and tone to communicate more effectively? Perhaps more importantly, how can we prevent nonverbal forms of communication from falsely influencing our perception of others? Making a good first impression. This is very important. As they say, you only get one chance to make a first impression, unless you have one of those memory wiping things from Men in Black, in which case, let's talk after the show. You know how to get a hold of me. If you're interested in a communications career, you'll come to learn the true value of a first impression. Alan and Barbara Pease also assert that when we meet people for the first time, we make snap judgments about their friendliness, assertiveness, and appearance. Without a single word being spoken, without even realizing it, people use nonverbal communication to size people up. According to the 55-38-7 formula, nearly 40% of a person's attitude is conveyed vocally through tone and inflection. So try to ensure that your tone matches whatever message you're trying to convey. You can also try speaking in a deeper voice. Research has shown that people who speak with a low-pitched voice are rated more authoritative and competent than those who speak with a higher pitch. Although people are rarely conscious of their body language and facial expressions, there are a couple of behaviors a person can tweak to improve their communication skills. For instance, research has shown that it takes conscious effort for a person to frown when looking at someone smiling. A smile is literally infectious. Research also shows that both men and women are more attracted to people who make eye contact and smile more often. A smile and just the right amount of eye contact can help you effectively convey information during first impressions and long after. Hand gestures can not only express your thoughts, but also convey your enthusiasm and passion for a topic. According to a body language expert, Dr. Carol Kinsey-Goman, quote, gesturing can help people form clearer thoughts, speak in tighter sentences, and use more declarative language. As with tone, try to ensure that your hand gestures match what you're saying. Otherwise, people will notice the mismatch and may be less likely to trust you. Again, You got to make sure that your body language, the tone of your voice, and the words that you use all line up and match each other, because otherwise people can inherently sense, whether they realize it or not, that something is just off. Interpreting body language. Body language can also provide insight into a person's emotional condition. For example, you likely already know that someone who crosses their arms is guarded or discontent, even when they claim the contrary. Reading body language is like learning a second language and can help separate perception from reality. According to Dr. Jeff Thompson, we can better decipher nonverbal signals by remembering the 3 C's of nonverbal communication: context, clusters, and congruence. Pardon me again. We've already covered congruence, comparing spoken words to body language and tone and making sure that they're all in line or congruent with one another. Applying context means better understanding the setting. For example, knowing that someone has anxiety can explain why they appeared tense during a fireworks display. Finally, using clusters means using not one, but multiple expressions or movements to influence our interpretation of a person's body language. It could just be a one-off thing. So make sure that there's like a pattern of repetition before you jump to conclusions about a person's body language. How much of communication is nonverbal? It may not be exactly 90%, but nonverbal communication, eye contact, smiling, hand gestures, heavily influences how people interpret and react to information. This is an important lesson to learn for anyone interested in a communications career, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. The University of Texas Permian Basin, they're just going to say that we offer a communications degree, and they have all kinds of sources here. So I'm going to take this article and I'm going to post this link to the Winnipeg Discord server. I highly recommend that you go and check this out for yourself, and then you can follow all of the links that they have in the article. So that is a great article that I found on how important nonverbal communication is and how you can use it to your advantage in communication with people, in conversation with people. Now, we're running short on time, so we'll just cut that bit out. It's not really that important. It's just another like physical example of a supportive supportive body language and less threatening body language. But we covered it enough already. Now, final tip. I'm just going to take one quick sip. Final tip for being a better communicator. In order to be a better communicator, work on being a better listener. If you want to learn to talk to people better, you first should probably learn to listen to people better. Again, like I said, starting with why, asking questions, asking why, getting the people talking about themselves. We've covered all of these things already in the previous tips as ways to get people to, or as ways to be a better communicator with people and communicate with people more effectively in a way that's going to be more likely to get your point across so that they'll be receptive to it. Get people talking about themselves, ask them a lot of questions, ask them why, especially why they do things, why they think things, why they believe things, and then actually listen to what they have to say. That's kind of the key that brings all those other tips together about asking questions and getting people talking about themselves. The key to getting all those, to actually having all those other tips be effective is you actually have to listen and retain what the person's answers are. So now we're going to very quickly again go through this last article. This is the last piece we have before the end of the show tonight here. This is an article from verywellmind.com on how to practice active listening. So this article, we're going to read through it real quick, and it's just going to give us a quick overview of what active listening is, how you can utilize it, and how you can practice it. Pardon me. Active listening refers to a pattern of listening that keeps you engaged with your conversation partner in a positive way. It is the process of listening attentively while someone else speaks, paraphrasing and reflecting back what is said, and withholding judgment and advice. Very important. When you practice active listening, you make the other person feel heard and valued. In this way, active listening is the foundation for any successful conversation. Again, I just finished saying that. All those other tips that I gave you about how to communicate with people and get them to open up more to you and be more receptive to you, they only work if you actually listen. Really listen. Now, features of active listening. Active listening involves more than just hearing someone speak. When you practice active listening, you are fully concentrating on what is being said. That means no looking at your phone, while they're talking to you. No fidgeting with like whatever, a pen or a deck of cards while they're talking to you. You give someone your full and undivided attention and listen with all 5 of your senses, or as many of your senses as possible. Maybe not taste. That's a little weird. Below are some features of active listening. You are neutral and non-judgmental. That is really, really hard to do. It's really easy to write that down in the article, but it is really hard to do in reality, to remain neutral and non-judgmental when you're talking to people. Because things these days, most conversations these days have been so hyper-politicized and polarized that it is incredibly hard to maintain a neutral, non-judgmental mindset going into conversation with people. But that's one of the most important things that you have to practice. You have to be patient, allow for periods of silence and introspection and contemplation. Verbal and nonverbal feedback to show that you are actually listening, smiling, maintaining eye contact, nodding, going like, yep, I understand, totally, leaning in and mirroring them. Asking them questions. Again, here it is again, asking questions, reflecting and rephrasing and paraphrasing back what is said, asking for clarification when necessary. Make sure you actually understand what the person is saying. If you ask the person for clarification, if you're not 100% clear on something that the person is saying, and you ask them to clarify what they just said, they will then be encouraged to do the same in return. If you say something that they don't quite understand, rather than them going, oh, well, I don't want to bother asking because I'll seem stupid, so I'm just going to work with this assumption of what I think they're saying, they're going to be encouraged to actually ask for clarification and make sure they actually truly understand what you are saying. So being an active listener, again, in turn, reciprocally encourages active listening in the people that you're talking to. That's the beauty about all of these tips that I'm giving you, is if you put these tips into action and use them consistently in communication with other people, it encourages them to do the same thing. In this way, active listening is the opposite of passive hearing, which I love. Active listening is the opposite of passive hearing. Some people should have that on their tombstones. Active listening serves the purpose of earning the trust of others and helping you to understand their situations. Active listening comprises both a desire to comprehend as well as to offer support and empathy to the speaker. It differs from critical listening in that you are not evaluating the message of the other person with the goal of offering your own opinion. I'll read that again. Active listening differs from critical listening in that you are not evaluating the message of the other person with the goal of offering your own opinion. Rather, the goal is simply for the other person to be heard and perhaps solve their own problems, which I am a huge fan of here on the show. I'm a huge fan of people solving their own problems. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. Benefits of active listening. Establishing the habit of active listening can have many positive impacts on your life. Active listening has many benefits in your relationship. It allows you to understand the point of view of another person and respond with empathy. It allows you to ask questions and make sure you understand what is being said. It validates the speaker and makes them want to speak longer. It benefits your work. Active listening at work is particularly important if you are in a supervisory position or interact with colleagues. Active listening allows you to understand problems and collaborate to develop solutions. It also reflects your patience, which is a valuable skill in any workplace. We're just going to scroll down here because we're running short on time. Tips for active listening. This is how you can start to practice active listening in your own life. This is how you can start to become a better active listener in your own life. Make eye contact while the other person speaks. In general, you should aim for eye contact about 60 to 70% of the time while you are listening. Anything more than that, and it gets a little bit creepy. Lean towards the other person and nod your head occasionally. Avoid folding your arms like this, as this signals that you are not listening. Maintain an open body language. Again, we just talked about nonverbal communication in the last tip. Don't cross your arms because this tells people that you're not listening and aren't interested in what they have to say, no matter how much you say that you are. You keep an open body language, hands down at your side or just resting in front of you, not in your pockets so that they can be sure that you're not fiddling with anything and diverting your attention elsewhere. Hands out in the open, down relaxed at your side, just nice, relaxed, open body language. Paraphrase what has been said rather than offering unsolicited advice or opinions. You might start off by saying, in other words, what you are saying is, and I laughed so hard when I read this bit. For anyone who has seen all the memes and the original interview of, I can't remember, Kathy something from BBC News interviewing Jordan Peterson. And that was basically the entire interview, was Jordan Peterson giving very complex, subtle, and nuanced stances and opinions on things. And then the host of the show, Kathy, basically going, so what you're saying is this very simple black and white oversimplification of what you just explained. So that I laughed really hard when I say that. Don't interrupt while the other person is speaking. I see this so much. I still struggle with this myself from time to time. But do not prepare your reply while the other person is still speaking. The last thing that he or she says may change the meaning of what has already been said. Basically, don't jump to conclusions. Watch nonverbal behavior. Again, we covered nonverbal communication already. Shut down your internal dialogue while listening. Avoid daydreaming. It's impossible to attentively listen to someone else and your own internal voice at the same time. Show interest by asking questions to clarify what is said. Ask open-ended questions to encourage the speaker. Ask closed yes or no questions, avoid closed yes or no questions that tend to shut down the conversation. Asking why is a great open-ended question. Avoid abruptly changing the subject. It will appear that you were not listening to the other person or are uninterested in what they have to say. Be open, neutral, and withhold judgment while listening. Be patient while you're listening. We are capable of listening much faster than others can speak. So don't be afraid to just sit and listen and be patient, and especially don't be afraid to take time to process what was just said and formulate a response. Learn to recognize active listening. Watch television interviews and observe whether the interview is practicing active listening and learn from their mistakes. So thank you, verywellmind.com, for this great breakdown of what active listening is, why it's important, and how we can practice it in our own lives. Now I have been giving, real life examples, trying to as much as possible about how I've put these things to play in my own life, or where I see these things playing out in the real world and in my own life. So now remember back in like tip number 3, when I said that people love to talk about themselves more than almost anything else. One of the only things that people love more than talking about themselves is having the people that they're talking to themselves about repeat that stuff about them back to them. People love to hear other people talk about them, especially when you're repeating things that they told you. If you have a conversation and early on in the conversation, the person mentions like their mother's birthday or something like that, and then later on in the conversation, you find a way to bring that up again. Oh yeah, that's like you were saying, you were at your mother's birthday the other day. People love that, and they eat that up because it proves that you're actually listening to them. And nothing, like I said, there are very, very few things that people enjoy more than talking about themselves, but I would argue that one of the few things that people enjoy more than talking about themselves is feeling like the people that they're talking to themselves about are actually listening to them. So that's why tip number 6 is be a better active listener. If you want to be a better communicator and you want to be a better talker, first learn to be a better listener. Now, I'm going to take one more quick sip of water here because my voice is slowly starting to give out. You'd think I'd be used to this by now. That's it for tonight. Those are the only tips that I have for you tonight. We've already gone over our 90-minute mark, so I'm going to cut it here. But I hope that was informative for people. I hope people got a lot out of that. Again, I'm going to post all the links and all the articles and all the videos and everything to the Discord server immediately following the broadcast tonight. So please go and check those things out for yourself. Share them around to as many people as you know, or as many people as you can, because if there's one thing that the world needs right now, it is better communication and better communicators. So please, I don't normally really ask people for this, even though I should, because it's a good part of like running a social media page. But tonight, I am like begging you, share this live stream around, share these articles around, share these videos around, because like I said, if there is one thing that the world needs right now, it is better communicators and better communication. So please spread this around as much as you can with as many people as you can. And let's try to help as many people as possible become better communicators so that we can help like I said, the world at large come to a deeper mutual understanding of truth and reality. That's the point of being a better communicator and being a communicator in general. So thank you all again. Like I said, I hope this was informative. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a few things. I'm just going to quickly wrap up the show tonight with the announcements and show notes and everything like that. So Media Watchdog Weekly was just streaming, as always, to Winnipeg Alternative Media and to the MacTown SmackDown Facebook pages, the YouTube channel, the Twitter pages. I mentioned all this at the top of the show. Go and find Winnipeg Alternative Media and the MacTown SmackDown on every social media platform that you can think of. Leave a like, leave a subscribe, leave a heart, whatever the hell the thing is that you're supposed to do on that particular social media platform. Do that thing on that particular social media platform. We highly appreciate it. It's a great way to help spread the word and help more people get more eyes on topics like this about how to be a better communicator. Really important stuff that people need to see these days. So please go and like and share, spread the word around, help us grow, help us gain a bigger audience, help us communicate with and influence, hopefully, more people. And then as always, make sure you go and check out winnipegalternativemedia.ca. That's where you'll be able to find everything WHAM related moving forward. Like I was saying at the top of the show, in the increasingly likely chance that Winnipeg Alternative Media and MacTown SmackDown get removed or censored or deplatformed from Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, etc., you will still be able to go and find all things Winnipeg Alternative Media archived and backlogged on winnipegalternativemedia.ca. And while you're there, I just briefly mentioned earlier about liking and sharing is a great way to show support for Winnipeg Alternative Media. Another great way to show support for Winnipeg Alternative Media in a more financial sense now, because as I mentioned at the top of the show, again, we are all volunteers here at Winnipeg Alternative Media. None of us gets paid a red hot cent to do what we do. However, there still are the odd cost and the odd expense to keep the lights on and keep the shows going and keep churning out the great content that you have come to know and love from Winnipeg Alternative Media. So if you have the room in your hearts and especially in your wallets, you can go to winnipegalternativemedia.ca/donate and just leave us a few dollars, leave us a few shekels. Only if you have the ability to do so without putting yourself out of sorts. Of course, obviously, we don't want anybody to give away their last $5 that they needed to pay for their kids' lunch money or something like that. So if you have just a few spare dollars and can afford it, go to winnipegalternativemedia.ca/donate. And that's a great way to show support. Or the other way that you can show support on our website, which is the way that I usually recommend people do it, because you also get something in return, is to get some Winnipeg Alternative Media branded merch. You can also get MacTown SmackDown branded merch. We have t-shirts that we sell that have the MacTown SmackDown logo on them now. We'll post the link to that in the comments section, or it might even pop up on the screen here. But again, go to winnipegalternativemedia.ca and you can find merch, t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, crop tops, pretty much any article of clothing that you can think of that you want to get Winnipeg Alternative Media's logo on, you can. Reach out to us at winnipegaltmedia@gmail.com. That's the website, or the email, right at the bottom right corner of the screen, and we can hook you up. That's pretty much it as far as Winnipeg Alternative Media stuff goes. Oh, one last thing. I mentioned this at the top of the show, and I mentioned it several times throughout the course of the live stream, but just in case you missed it, everything that we covered tonight, the articles, videos that we covered, the references and resources that I used, everything is going to be posted to the Winnipeg Alternative Media Discord server immediately following the end of the broadcast in just a couple of minutes here. So go and join the Winnipeg Alternative Media Discord server. The link should be popping up on the screen anytime now, and we will also be posting it in the comments section, so you can find it there. Go join the Winnipeg Alternative Media Discord server, head to the Media Watchdog Weekly channel specifically, and that is where you will be able to find all of these materials. Please, I highly encourage you to go and check them out for yourself, read the articles, watch the videos, process it for yourself, think about it for yourself, come to your own conclusions, make your own decisions, and live your own life, because that is what we are here to encourage people to do at Media Watchdog Weekly, MacTown SmackDown, and Winnipeg Alternative Media. Not here to tell anybody what to do, not here to tell anybody how to live, not here to tell anybody what the decisions to make. We are here to present information as objectively as possible and in as unbiased a way as possible that we find useful, and let people do with that information what they will and make their own choices. So, thank you all for tuning in tonight. I hope you all enjoyed. Join us in 2 weeks' time on what I will believe will be August 16th, again at 8 p.m., when we go live again for the 4th live stream question and answer period on Media Watchdog Weekly. Any question on any topic is open and available. Leave your questions in the comment section 2 weeks from now, and we will do our best on air to answer them. Doesn't have to be media related or COVID related or government related. Ask me literally any question about any topic, and I will do my best to answer them. So stay tuned for that in 2 weeks' time on the 16th. And then 2 weeks after that, on the 30th of August, we will be covering part 2 of how to be a better, more effective communicator. Thank you for tuning in, as always. Thank you for the great participation in the comment section tonight. It's great to see people chiming in, leaving their thoughts and opinions on things. It's great just to see people interacting in the comment section and having a nice conversation in general and not calling each other names and whatnot. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for participating in the comments. I hope we will see you all in 2 weeks' time for the 4th Media Watchdog Weekly live stream Q&A. And until then, good night, Canada.
Yes, I see. Good news, everyone.
Fact check.